Guys, I'm here at in Jackson Hole at the Wyoming Game and Fish office, the regional office. They have offices all over the state, Wyoming Game and Fish do. And in these buildings, this is where hunters come to buy permits and stuff like that. But they also have scientists who work in these buildings. They have their own library in this building, a research library with wildlife and science data and so forth. And these scientists do a lot to manage the health of the herds in the state. They make sure that the groups of people that are interested in animals, whether they're hunters or conservationists or environmentalists or just citizens that live where wildlife tend to come into the private lands a lot, they work to help keep a balance of people's interests and to make sure the wildlife are taken care of, but also the people are taken care of too, and so keep a balance there. But they do a lot of research studies, these scientists and biologists, and they're people just like you and me that might have grown up with an interest in animals or developed it later on, and then they got into these cool jobs. So we'll talk to some of them and learn more about what they do and what these regional offices do. So hope you enjoy this field trip. So here in the Fish and Game office, they have some of these cool mounts of different animals from around the state. So I thought I'd show you some of those here. They've got a wolf here. They've got a mountain goat. They have some of these in the Snake River Canyon on my way home to Star Valley. I'm hoping some will be out close enough I can film them. Here's a wolf. It looks a lot like a dog. You can see how big their paws are there. It's bigger than my hand. Trying not to touch it. There we go. Here's a buffalo. They got that thick hide. The taxidermist was telling me this skin on the top of their head, the skin, not the hair, the skin is like 2 inches thick. It's just a thick skin underneath that hair. Pretty tough animal. There's a grizzly bear. There's a little sign over there that says that this bear, when they had to put it down because it kept getting into a neighborhood and eating human food and stuff and garbage, was 25 years old. There's the fact sheet. You can press pause and read that if you want to read the whole thing. And they have some skulls up here. There's a grizzly bear skull. This looks like either he was really old and his teeth were worn out, or maybe they found the skull after they kind of broke down a bit. Here's a black bear skull. There's a bighorn sheep. There's pronghorn antelope in the middle. That's a male, and then on the sides, I'm not sure if those are just young males or what. And then here's some interesting thing. Here's a wolverine skull. Here's a badger skull. It's pretty sharp teeth on that badger. Here's a raccoon skull. Here's a porcupine. Kind of interesting. Here's a beaver. See those sharp teeth they chomp on those trees with? So with those teeth, beavers do this work on wood. They just chew it down and they'll drag it down and build dams with it. It's pretty amazing what just 1 or 2 or 3 beavers can do, how big of a dam they can build, the size of trees they chop down with their teeth. Here's a mountain lion. bobcat. There's a coyote. They've got bigger teeth than you would think. There's a bison, buffalo. There's a wolverine. They have really big claws, strong teeth. They're a tough animal. If you could read about wolverines, they're really interesting. Here's the common loon. There's a hawk or a falcon of some kind. There's a mule deer. There's some fish. Snake River cutthroat trout. I catch a lot of these. Another Yellowstone cutthroat trout, Colorado cutthroat trout, and a Bonneville cutthroat trout. In Wyoming, if you catch all four, it's called the Cut Slam, and you can get a certificate. If you catch all four of those, let's go up here and see these mounts. Oop, there's a moose. See that beard that hangs down? Kind of interesting. There's mule deer. There's a turkey. Some ducks. Some pronghorn antelope. There's an elk. It's a big elk. Those big antlers on the back there. There's another elk. These scientists have their own wildlife library. Oh, and then there's a trumpeter swan. We'll interview one of the scientists and she'll talk about a trumpeter swan that she studies. She says there's only 200 here in the area that stick around here year round. You can see how big they are. But you'll see these in Yellowstone Park, and then here in the Jackson area. It's a big bird. So this is the Fish and Game Regional Office in Jackson, and they have regional offices around the state. And they have scientists and pretty cool people who work here that help manage all the hunting, but then they also help manage all the herds, all the animals, because the animals in the state, all the wild animals that we've seen, technically they belong to the state of Wyoming and the citizens, and our taxes pay for all these scientists and these offices, and they make sure the herds stay healthy and strong, and they do a lot of research, and so it's a pretty cool place that does a lot of things for people. So, oh, there's an owl. then we'll go talk to some scientists and do a couple of interview field trips with them. So see what they have to say. Hey guys, I'm here at the Wyoming Fish and Game. What do you call it actually?
Game and Fish Regional Office.
Game and Fish Regional Office here in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So I'm back up here, about an hour from my house down in Star Valley, and I'm here with what's your official?
I'm the regional wildlife disease biologist.
Okay, so I'm here with one of the biologists for the Fish and Game, and we're going to talk to him today about what he does, how he got into it, and a few things like that. Kind of interesting. So hopefully you find it interesting. Hello.
Hi there.
So what's your name?
Ben Wise. I work out of the Jackson Regional Office for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. I am the regional wildlife disease biologist, meaning that I work with a whole suite of large mammals and study disease and disease transmission and ways of reducing disease risk to both wildlife and livestock.
Okay. I guess sometimes the kids want to know, how do you get into a job like this? When you got out of middle school and high school, what led to this position, I guess?
Awesome. So I actually grew up in Wyoming. I grew up in Worland. Through middle school and high school, I took a lot of science courses and a lot of mathematics. A lot of what we do for the biology side of things deals with modeling and mathematical equations and trying to figure out how to tie data together to come up with a conclusion. Having a strong math, science, and writing background helps a lot. And then on top of that, just having an interest in the outdoors and natural processes is very important, because the more you understand about nature and the natural cycles and how animals behave, the better informed you can be when making wildlife management decisions. From there, I went to a junior college in northeastern Wyoming.
Which college?
I went to Sheridan College.
Okay.
And actually worked with the Game and Fish up there on some projects as kind of a work study opportunity. Graduated from junior college, went to the University of Wyoming, and then completed both my bachelor's and a master's degree at the University of Wyoming.
What were your degrees in?
So my undergraduate degree was in range and wildland management, with a watershed restoration minor, and then my master's degree was in veterinary sciences, looking at toxicology and toxicity issues.
What is that?
So working with the basis of my master's degree was working on determining maximum allowable levels of heavy metals in waters. It was a project sponsored or paid for by the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, and it was used as a project to help set regulations for effluent waters with in relation to oil and gas development, mining, that kind of stuff. So it was a project looking at what should be the maximum allowable limits of these heavy metals into water systems to not have negative impacts on wildlife and livestock.
Okay. How did you end up here with this job?
When I was getting finished up with my master's degree, I started running low on money on the grant that I was working off of, and I ended up getting a job working for the Game and Fish at the Beth Williams Tom Thorne Wildlife Research Center in Sebille, Wyoming, so about halfway between Laramie and Wheatland. Worked at that job for about a year, and then was hired on full-time as a habitat biologist out of Green River. From there, I worked in that position for about 2.5 years before transferring up to Jackson to work on wildlife disease issues in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem.
So what are some of the interesting things you do in your job here?
My job allows me to spend a lot of time outside. Probably spend upwards of 300 days a year in the field. On top of that, I spend a lot of time working directly with wildlife. We capture wildlife to either monitor for disease or to put tracking devices on them, radio collars on them. So I spend about 3.5 months out of the year working directly with wildlife, capturing, immobilizing, collaring. Through the winter, in the spring we begin tracking these animals. One of the diseases we work with is called brucellosis, and it's transmitted through birthing. So the act of actually having a calf elk is where the transmission of brucellosis occurs. And because of that, the more we know about birth site locations and timing and what they're selecting for, the more we know about disease transmission. So I spend my spring monitoring elk movements and figuring out where they're calving, going into these areas, trying to determine what exactly they're looking for in a birth site. Based on that, we can build a big model and figure out where your highest risk of transmission is going to occur. Throughout the summer, I do a lot of habitat work, a lot of habitat inventory work, and then also work with the federal land management agencies on developing and implementing habitat projects to improve wildlife habitat. And then through the fall, we work with hunters to collect hunter-harvested samples from deer, elk, moose, and bison.
Okay. When you collar animals, what are some of the animals you collar to track?
I work primarily with elk, so we'll typically capture 500 to 700 elk a winter. Capture and sample 500 to 700 elk a winter.
Wow.
We'll typically try to put out between 50 and 100 collars throughout the Jackson and Pinedale regions in an effort to better understand both disease transmission and also animal movements. And so yeah, we capture animals either through chemical immobilization or through corral traps on feed grounds. At the same time, other individuals in the department are working with bighorn sheep and mountain goats, looking at the dynamics between those two species and potential disease overlap. We capture a lot of mule deer in relation to movements and population trends in our mule deer herds, and even do some work with moose, depending on where the projects are at. So yeah, end up capturing a whole number of animals for both research and disease monitoring.
So we recently had a field trip out onto the refuge on the sleighs, and we saw the collars on some of the elk. Is that?
That's exactly what we're doing.
Okay.
Yep. So we work cooperatively with the National Elk Refuge to deploy those collars on the refuge. We also deploy collars on the 22 state-run feed grounds that we have as well.
So what does that collar do? How do you interact with that collar, I guess?
Yeah, so we've got multiple different technologies and collars that are still in use. We have some collars that just emit a signal. They're called VHF collars, and they just emit a VHF signal, so we can listen for them. We can find them by telemetry. We also have store on board collars, so the collar is actually collecting data but stores it internally on the collar. On those ones, we actually have to go collect that collar. It either falls off due to a blow-off device that we put on, or we have to immobilize the animal and take the collar off. And our latest technology we're using are satellite uplink collars. So they're actually communicating with a satellite and giving us remote downloads of the collar information. So we're able to get almost real-time movement data off of these collars. We get an upload every 3 to 4 days. So that's like the cutting edge technology. And what we're seeing in collars is the reliability is increasing, the amount of data that they can collect, both in just number of points, but also in duration of the collar life is increasing and the weight is decreasing. So yeah, all three of those things combined are actually making this, making the collaring process easier for us, and we're actually gaining more data for less money.
When you go out into the field and are tracking animals or doing things like that, are you on foot, horse, four-wheeler, helicopter? What do you do?
All the above. Yeah, we spend a lot of time getting from point A to point B, you know, in a truck. Get there generally either trying to go in on the collars on foot or on horseback, especially in western Wyoming where the road densities are pretty low. We'll do fixed wing flights a couple times a spring to locate these animals that don't have satellite uplink collars. Yeah, not much helicopter work for us. It's a very expensive way to move around, but definitely spend a lot of time riding horses and hiking.
What are some? Do you have any interesting kind of crazy experiences that stick out in your mind over the years, or?
Yeah, I mean, we every day when you're interacting with wildlife, it can be different. So from day to day, you never know what you're going to end up having to do. We also spend a lot of time in these positions because we don't have a lot of staff, so we help each other out quite a bit. So we spend a lot of time working with urban wildlife in town, either capturing or hazing animals out of conflict or damaged situations, and oftentimes what you think an animal is going to do and what they actually do are completely different. And so you have to have an ability to kind of read what the animal's doing, body language wise, and kind of keep yourself in a safe situation. We have had multiple instances of moose charging as we try to move them out of urban areas. I've had elk stuck in fences that you cut out, and then the elk's standing there, fully mobile, 3 feet away after you get it out. Have cut deer out of hockey goals without immobilizing them, just because a lot of times the situation you're put into, you have to kind of use the tools that you have at hand to free that animal. So yeah, we spend a lot of time working with animals that are in probably not the best situations, and trying to do that both effectively and safely is our kind of our number one goal.
Any challenging experiences you've ever had in your job, or?
Yeah, we have a lot of. I mean, the job is full of challenges, and that's what makes it interesting. We get challenging, complicated questions. We have a lot of the work we do. You're kind of skating a fine line between doing the science for science sake and doing science for kind of public perception, and to answer questions that are being brought up both socially and politically. So a lot of times scientifically the answer is easy to find, but being able to interpret the data to answer questions that are either being asked socially or politically of what's going on the ground is one of the more difficult portions of the job. It keeps it interesting. It makes you think outside the box, and kind of keeps you from kind of working yourself into a corner. Yeah, and like everything else, we're managing wildlife for the public. We're managing wildlife for the citizens of Wyoming. So we have a diverse population in the state, and sometimes what one group of people sees is a very easy answer is not seen the same way by other groups, and trying to figure out how to balance that out is a challenge from time to time.
So you're not just a scientist.
No. Yeah, the science is the easy part. The difficult part is working with the public and kind of trying to. And what we really struggle as a profession is taking the science, distilling it down, and getting it out to the public in a form that's easily understood. Scientists are really good at talking to each other. we're not that good at talking to the general public, and that's something that we have to work on as a profession. Because you can do the best work possible, but if you can't get that to the public and the public can't interpret what's going on with it, it's all for naught.
What would these elementary and middle school and high school kids might want to know? Can you think of anything?
Yeah, I think I would just hope that they appreciate the resources that they have around them. We live in a state that is a large portion of the state is public land. You can go out on public land. Anybody can go out on this land. We've got a wildlife resource that is second to none. And I just would hope that everybody kind of is aware of it and appreciates the fact that we live in a pretty special spot with a lot of really interesting wildlife.
Cool. Well, guys, I thought that was pretty interesting. I want to thank him. What was your name again?
Ben?
Ben. Thank Ben Wise, right?
Yep.
For talking to us today. Maybe we'll come back and talk some more or see some of the things he does in person or something like that. But thanks for coming today. See ya.